Hello, all. Welcome back to another interesting session. This video would be the continuation video of my previous session where I've explained the concepts of GitHub workflows and continuous integration and how to configure a basic workflow in a GitHub, and I have explained the concepts of triggers and runners and how to configure a workflow. So all these things were explained in the previous session. I would recommend you to watch the video before watching this video. So I'll paste the link in description below. Please go through it. This video is very similar to a real-time scenario, so I would recommend you not to skip the video till end. So in this current video we are going to see these 8 different things. So breaking down the video into 8 different parts, let's go in a sequential manner. Okay, so let's see how to configure a workflow with multiple jobs. Yeah, so in this video we are using the same repo that is used in the previous session. So here I have configured a new workflow. So coming to the first part, how to configure multiple jobs. Okay, so I have configured a new workflow and I have named it something like CI workflow, and I'm triggering it on event like manual trigger, that is workflow dispatch. So currently while triggering I'm fetching two inputs from the user, that is major version and minor version. So in environment block I'm declaring runner variable that I'm hard coding it because it's a static value. Okay, and the major version and minor version would be dynamic, so something it will depend on the user's choice. So I'm fetching it from the inputs and assigning them to the major and minor versions. So this covers my environment block. Hope this is clear. And coming to the jobs, so I'll be explaining what I'm doing in the jobs configuration. So first see how to configure multiple jobs. Okay, so in the jobs what I'm doing is, in the very first job I'm exposing the variables that I'm using in the current workflow that are being used. Okay, and in the second stage what I'm doing is, suppose if user is passing the major and minor version and he's trying to run the workflow like that, he has done some hundreds of workflows, and if he wants to see some of the old workflows inputs, that would be hectic to find out from the logs. So instead I'm just printing the inputs as the summary, okay, that we are going to see very shortly. Okay, and in the third stage what I'm doing is, I'm just generating the build version for the Docker image. After that what I'm doing is, I'm installing the dependencies for the current application for my repo. Okay, after that I'm running some test cases, okay, random test cases. After that what I'm doing is, I'm just building a Docker image and pushing it to the Docker container registry. So this is how I have set up multiple jobs, okay, within a workflow. So this suffices our part 1. Yeah, coming to the second part. In first part we saw how to configure multiple jobs within a workflow, and in the part 2 we are going to see how to execute them in a sequential manner. So let's jump into the workflow again. So in order to make the jobs run in a sequential manner, what we need to do is, we need to create a dependency. Okay, how we need to create a dependency, let's see. So currently I want my variables job should be running in the first place. Okay, after that my inputs job should start. So what I'm doing is, I'm writing a block called needs. In that I'm declaring the job one, that is variables. So what it will do is, this inputs use job will run only after the variables job is successful. Yeah, hope you got it. So in the similar way, if we go to a third job, what I've done is, I have mentioned the second job name, that is inputs used. So when job 1 and job 2 are done, then only my job 3 would run. So similarly, I have configured my entire workflow so that it will be running in a sequential manner. So now we saw how to configure multiple jobs within a single workflow and how to make them run in a sequential manner. Okay, now let's jump into the part 3, like how to configure a shared workflow. Okay, so for this I have created a separate repository. So let's jump into that repository now. So this is the GitHub repo that we are discussing about shared workflows. Okay, so after creating a shared workflow, first thing you need to do is go to settings tab, and in the left side you will find an option called actions. In that, navigate to general. So these are the repository permissions. Once you create your shared workflow within your organization, sometimes you will get an error like workflow not found or something else. That is because the permissions for your workflow. So I'm allowing it for all actions and reusable workflows. And in the end, there will be another option if you are within an organization. Okay, that you need to set it like it should be discoverable from other repositories within your organization. Okay, on selecting that option, your workflows will be discoverable. This is something that I want to share. And as we discussed in the previous session, your workflows should always be in this path, that is .github/workflows. If I open it, see, I have written 4 shared workflows. The thing is, in every CI workflow, there will be multiple scans and multiple stages that will be common across all the repositories. Okay, like for Node projects, for .NET, for Java, let's say. Okay, for each and every framework, the process will be same, scans will be same. Instead of writing all similar piece of code, we can configure the shared workflows this way, and by calling just the name of your shared workflow, entire piece of code will be replicated to your main workflow and gets executed. So to avoid the complications and to decrease your CI workflow length, okay, we can use the shared workflows concept. So for the demo purpose, what I've done is I've break down the workflow into 4 jobs. Okay, for that 4 jobs I've written 4 shared workflows. So the first one goes like, I'm creating a build version for my Docker image. Okay, here I'm using a trigger or event called on workflow call. Okay, whenever this workflow is called with this particular name and with this inputs, okay, this workflow will be executed. Okay, let's see the inputs: major and minor version and runner. These 3 inputs we will be getting it from the user itself. Okay, I mean, we need to pass it from the main workflow. Okay, so coming to the job, here the runner will be replaced with the value that we are passing from the input from main CI. Okay, and the job will start. Okay, so what it will do is, first it will check out the repository. This is not required, just I've written it. And here the main motto is to generate the build version, right? So I'm writing a shell command in the step 2. Okay, that is image version, that is v major version dot minor version dot run number. Okay, major and minor version we will be getting it from the inputs, okay, that are passed to this shared workflow. And this run number we will get it automatically from the GitHub events. Okay, so what I'm doing is, again I'm calling the image version from the previous step, I mean previous command. Okay, and I'm exporting this image version as a GitHub output. Okay, this is important, GitHub output, I'm exporting it. Okay, so for this single job, I have written an outputs block in line number 22. If you see, that is image version. So how I'm getting this value? See, steps. This is the steps. Create tag. For this particular step, I have added the ID called create tag. So within the steps dot create tag, in that there is an output. So here is the output. Okay. So in this, the image version name will be called over here. Okay. So this is how I'm exporting the outputs. So what happens is, in a general workflow, okay, if it is not shared, okay, if you are exporting the output for a single job, this will be okay, reachable, I mean this can be used within a single workflow only. We cannot use this into a different workflow. Okay, now the scenario is, here we are in a shared workflow and we are passing some outputs. This will not be used in your main workflow again. Okay, in order to make that reusable, or we need to, if we need to pass this output to a different workflow, what we need to do is, we need to configure outputs just like we are taking inputs from this, from the main workflow. We need to pass output to the main workflow also. Okay, so here what I'm doing is, again I'm declaring the image version. Okay, how we are getting this image version is, see, from jobs generating build version, in that we have an outputs called image version. Same thing I've written here. Okay, jobs dot generating build version, in that outputs we have in that image version. Okay, so this is the value assigned to the image version. So just like we are fetching inputs from the main workflow to shared workflow, we are exporting the outputs from shared workflow to the main workflow. So that's the concept, guys. So similarly, for building artifact, for building image and pushing it to Docker registry, okay, Docker container registry, and running test case, I have written like 4 shared workflows. So this is the concept. In the next part, we are going to see how these shared workflows will be consumed in the main workflow. Okay, so we have completed 3 parts, like configuring multiple jobs, running them in a sequential manner, and how to configure shared workflows. These 3 parts we saw. And now coming to part 4, how to consume this shared workflow within your main workflow. Okay, so let's jump into the main CI workflow now. So now in the main workflow, how to use the shared workflow. Okay, so in job number 3 of generating build version, here I'm using a shared workflow called generating build version.yaml that we saw in the shared workflow just now. Okay, that is in the master branch. So how we can use is, we need to give the owner name slash repository name followed by the path of the shared workflow, and you need to mention at the rate in which branch it is. Okay, so as it is in master branch, in the particular path called GitHub workflows followed by the workflow name. Okay, this is how you need to mention the shared workflow, so that this entire workflow will be called into your main workflow. Okay, here by passing these inputs. Okay, runner, major version and minor version. So if you see, only these three inputs we are passing, right? Runner, major version and minor version. So similarly for the next stage, that is to install dependencies also. So this is the repo owner name, and this is the repository name, followed by the path of the workflow and at the rate branch name. Okay, and with the input called runner, because this workflow has only one input, that is a runner name. So similarly for all the rest of jobs, I have configured the same. Okay, what changes is the shared workflow name will change and branch and all will be same. Okay, this depends again on your configuration. So this is how we consume a shared workflow in a main workflow. Okay, so let's go to part 5. So in part 5 we are going to see how to pass inputs from main workflow to a shared workflow. Okay, so let's jump into the workflow again. So again, coming to job 3, we are using a shared workflow here. Okay, this requires 3 inputs. So if you want to pass input from main workflow to a shared workflow, you need to use a block called with. Okay, with this inputs using this shared workflow, it will pass to a shared workflow. Okay, that you have configured in users. Okay, so if you want to pass inputs, you need to use with block. So this is part 5. So part 6 is how to export outputs from shared workflow to a main workflow. This already we saw, but we will have a quick glance again. So if you want to export any value to your main workflow from shared workflow, you need to mention it in the outputs block. So the mechanism is simple. The way you consume inputs from main workflow to shared workflow, you need to pass outputs from shared workflow to main workflow. Okay, so you need to mention in the outputs block, which should be indented same as inputs. So this is part 6. So coming to part 7, how to pass secrets from main workflow to a shared workflow. The thing is, all the secrets will be configured within your CI main workflow only. So if you want to pass those secrets from your main workflow to a shared workflow, how do we configure that? That we are going to see. So the concept is simple. In my main workflow, I have all the secrets, but in my shared workflow, we don't have secrets of all the repositories. Okay, in order to pass the secrets from your main workflow to shared workflow, we need to use a block called secrets to inherit. Okay, so what it does is it will inherit all the main repository secrets to your shared repository. So this is part 7. So coming to the last part of the video, we are going to see how to export a GitHub summary. Okay, so as we discussed, developers will be doing hundreds of builds per day, and it's very difficult to find some information from the previous executed workflow. So in order to overcome this issue, we can export the data that we require as a summary for your executed workflow using this flag called GitHub step summary. Okay, this will export the value which you have mentioned in the echo statement to your summary of your workflow. Okay, that we will see once the workflow is executed successfully. So as we have completed the 8 parts, let's have a quick recap of the workflow. Okay, the name of workflow is CI workflow, and we are using an event called workflow dispatch, that is a manual trigger. And currently we are fetching 2 inputs from the user, that is major version and minor version. Okay, coming to the environment block, we have 3 variables, that is runner, major version and minor version. The value of runner is static, so we have hard coded it. Okay, and for the variables major version and minor version, the value will be dynamic, so we are fetching it from the inputs block. Okay, this is about the environment block. And coming to the jobs, the first job we are using is variables. Why we are using variables? Because we are exporting the values of the environment block. Okay, in a workflow, if you are not using a shared workflow, directly the environment block variables can be referred in your workflow. Okay, so this will work whenever you are using a shared workflow and you are trying to pass these values to a shared workflow. This may not work. Okay, this will be passed as a blank value. So in order to overcome this, I have configured a new job, that is variables, where I'm exporting the outputs of all the environment variables. Okay, and whenever you want to use or whenever you want to pass the values to a shared workflow, you can directly pass from the job one's outputs. Okay, job one output means, see, in the third job, that is building version, I have created a dependency on the variables. Okay, that is the job one where I'm exporting the outputs. Okay, so here in needs variables outputs. Okay, in this outputs what all the three environment variable values are there, I can fetch it from job 1, okay, instead of fetching it from the environment block. So this is why we are using variables job, okay, that is job 1. And in job 2, just I'm printing the what are the inputs user is passing to the current workflow, that to a GitHub summary, okay, that I'm just exporting like a GitHub summary. We are going to see that shortly once the execution is done. And in third stage, we are generating the workflow, generating the workflows docker build version, okay. So we are consuming the shared workflow, and we are using a with block, and we are passing three inputs required for that shared workflow. Similarly, we are installing dependencies using a shared workflow again by passing a input called runner. And fourth or fifth job is test case. Okay, again we are using a shared workflow with the input called runner. And in the final stage, once all these stages execution is done and it's success, the last stage will be executed, where we will build a docker image and publish it to a docker container registry. Okay, this is about the workflow that I've configured. Now we are going to execute and see the result. So now on clicking on view runs, so it will navigate to the workflow that we have configured, and here we can see the option called run workflow. This we will get when we are using an event called workflow dispatch, that is a manual trigger. Okay, here I'm selecting the branch, so I have configured my workflow in the master branch. So here currently I'm trying to give the version like 4 is the major version, and let's say 9 will be my minor version. Okay, and I'm running the workflow. So I'll refresh the page. Workflow has started, and if you open the workflow, see, as we said, we are executing the workflow in a sequential manner. First we are exposing the variables, and we are trying to print the inputs that I am passing to the workflow. And after that we are generating the build version, we are installing the dependencies, testing the test, we are running the test cases, and after that we are building the image and pushing it to a docker container registry. Okay, so three stages are done. Installing dependencies is going on. Yeah, this is done. So it will run some test cases if there are any. So I've just written a echo statement, as this is just for a demo purpose. Okay, and I'm trying to build and publish the image. Yeah, it's building the image. If we see the image that we published, see, this is the image, my node app, and the version I have used is major version is 4, minor version is 9 that we passed. And as this is the first execution, build number will be 1. Okay, so the image got published, and let's go to the summary. Okay, so if we scroll down, all the executions are done in a sequential manner. And if I scroll down, see the current inputs used, that is the second job, we are printing the inputs, right? So we got the inputs. What runner we have used is Ubuntu latest, and major version is 4 and minor version is 9, as we have mentioned. And coming to the image that we have built and published, that we got is my node app. Okay, major version is 4, minor version is 9, and build number is 1. Okay, so yeah, that's it for this session, guys. Hope this video will be useful in your learning process, and thanks for watching my video. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe my YouTube channel. Thank you so much.